What is the creepiest thing that has ever happened while you were home alone? It was like 2 a.m., and I had to take my dog out to go to the bathroom. As I'm standing out in the yard, I notice there's this really big dude walking down the sidewalk towards my house. The big dude looks over toward me and screams, "Hey! Come over here, right now!" He sounded really pissed, and I definitely did not go over to him. I locked myself in the house and watched him from inside. He was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, just staring at my house and looking really mad. As I'm watching him, 2 cars pull up to the curb, and a bunch of people get out and join him to stare angrily at my house. I'm very confused at this point because I don't have any enemies, and I wasn't sure what all these people wanted with me. The guy who originally screamed at me starts walking toward my house and screams, "I said come over here. Right now." At that moment, my motion-activated light on my porch went on, and I could see a giant goofy-looking dog sitting on my porch. The dog sprinted away when the light went on, and the big dude went chasing him up the street. The people got back in the cars and chased after the dog too. As it turns out, the big goofy dog was their family pet, and it had escaped from their house. It saw me in the yard with my dog and was running towards me to play. I never even saw it until the light came on. The big dude was just yelling at his dog, not me. The people in the cars were his family members trying to help catch the dog. I actually saw them walking down the street a few days later and introduced myself. Both the dog and the man were very friendly. It was a happy ending for an initially creepy situation. My bedroom window faced the backyard. I heard a bunch of thrashing around the tree right outside, and then men's voices. I was home alone and scared shitless. I crept to the dining room to look out of a bigger window and saw a big truck with lights on in the alley, and 2 men silhouetted in my yard. In Texas, there are often dirt alleyways between the rows of houses. But something about the inflection of their muffled voices made it seem like maybe they were looking for a pet. So, I opened the window and called out to ask if everything was okay. They apologized and said their dog had run through my yard. I realized the thrashing I heard first was the dog, and wished them luck on finding it, and gave them some tips on where the dog might have gone based on the neighborhood layout. That was it. When I was 17 or 18, I slept on the floor on a futon mattress. One night I'm laying there trying to get to sleep, and I hear this kind of swishing sound. So, I ignore it. A few minutes later, I hear it again. I really didn't want to get up, but I could not guess what was making the sound. I got up and turned on the light. Nothing scurried immediately. Thankfully the sound happened again, and I could tell it was coming from the corner of the room. Then I saw it. The biggest wolf spider I'd ever seen. It was walking on a roll of brown wrapping paper. The sound was coming from this absolute unit of a spider walking on paper. It was so big that I could hear its footsteps. I really wanted to sleep and wanted it gone. How do you shoot the devil in the back? What if you miss it? That's pretty much how it went. Swing and a miss, and Spidey bro does the GTFO. Except it's probably still in the room. I couldn't sleep that night without getting the crawling sensation repeatedly. I'm good with spiders now and would have left the majestic beast alone. Not that my flailing did anything but annoy it. I was awoken in the middle of the night to something pulling on my comforter at the foot of my bed. I look down the foot of my bed and see this 3 or 4 foot shadow figure trying to climb on my bed. I panicked, thinking I was about to get murdered. I flipped on the light to find my 15-pound dog trying to drag my 4-foot teddy bear onto my bed. It was terrifying at the moment. Now I just find it hilarious. Someone started trying to force the door of my small garage apartment open, while I was laying in bed inches from the door, at around 2 a.m. I picked up my phone and called my dad. I was living in the detached garage apartment behind his house, and asked him if he was trying to get into my room for some reason. I was nearly petrified, and I was whispering, but whoever it was stopped and ran off as soon as they heard my voice. I think they thought it was a storage shed, and they were just trying to burglarize it, or maybe trying to find and steal my dad's motorcycle. I think they didn't bargain on someone being inside. I was in bed when I heard a rustle. Looked around. Saw nothing. Lay back down. Heard a louder rustle. Looked around. Looked under the bed. Lay back down with my heart in my throat. Something large landed on my face and chest. It was the stupid poster over my bed. To this day, I'm proud I didn't soil myself. When I moved into my first apartment, I heard a loud thunk on the patio followed by this weird scraping noise. It was late, and it freaked me out, so I walked towards the sliding glass door. I lived on the 3rd floor, so I knew the only thing that was getting to the patio had to be the Mothman or some shit. I threw open the blinds, and the fucking Mothman was on my patio, staring at me. I screamed. It was my own reflection in the glass. I am the Mothman. I was a 21-year-old female, staying alone at my family's mountain cabin. It was in the middle of the week, and the other cabins in the area were empty. Around midnight I saw headlights from a car coming up the driveway. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I ran and hid. I went upstairs to look through a window very carefully from a dark room so I would be very difficult to spot. I saw 3 strange men standing outside. They were banging on the door. I was absolutely terrified. Luckily, they didn't try to break in, but I did not feel safe and could not sleep that night. It later turned out that they were Polish carpenters that were coming to work on the cabin as they had done several times before. My dad forgot to tell me that they would be coming and forgot to tell them that I was there. They had an agreement to stay in the cabin while working on it, but instead, they had to spend the first night in their car. I was home alone, and the rest of my family was on a trip somewhere. They were returning after I had to head back to campus, so I stayed back. One afternoon, I was in my room, behind a door I locked obsessively, in the basement when the stereo, also in the basement, came on deafeningly loud. For about an hour, Bowie played at such a high volume that I couldn't hear anything else. After it stopped, I stayed in my room, petrified, for hours. This was in 2004, so there was no Bluetooth technology, and the stereo was from the 80s, no remote. Either someone was in the basement, or it was the weirdest glitch ever. We checked with several family members with keys who might have stopped by, but everyone denied being there, and there were no signs of any entry at all. At least the music was really good. So, I lived in an apartment by myself. And every once in a while, I'd be about to fall asleep, and I'd feel a weight next to me as if someone else got into the bed. It was a queen-size bed. So, at the time, I was dating a woman who would sleep over from time to time, but I never mentioned this to her. So, one night while she was over, I had to leave due to a family emergency. I told her it was okay if she slept at mine alone if she would like, and that I would be back the next day. I get home that morning, and she tells me, "The weirdest thing happened last night. As I was falling asleep, I thought you had come home and gotten into bed with me because I definitely felt someone get into bed on the other side, but when I opened my eyes, you weren't here." Freaked me out. When I was about 11 or 12, I was home alone, when a really creepy sounding dude called my house and asked where my dad was. Like an idiot, I told him he wasn't home. The guy's response was to start laughing and then tell someone else, "He says he's not home." The other dude in the background started creepily laughing as well, and then the line went dead. I ended up grabbing 2 hockey sticks and waiting by the front door until my parents returned a couple hours later. Terrifying and weird. A few years ago, I went to sleep one Sunday evening and lost 2 full days. I woke up in a cold sweat, screaming for my fiancé, but he wasn't there. I thought it was still Sunday night. It was actually late Tuesday evening or very early Wednesday morning. I called my fiancé on mobile, frantic, asking where he was, and he said he had left for his work trip to Boston. He left around 5 a.m. Monday morning. I must have gotten up to use the bathroom and take care of the animals because I hadn't soiled myself, and the dogs hadn't used the bathroom in the house either. But I have zero recollection of those missed days. I was terrified to go back to sleep while I was home alone for that week, and it's never happened again. I was 11 or 12 years old. Internet was not a thing in my country yet, but the first PCs with Windows 98 came in, and we have one at home. I was playing with word art, yeah, good times though, at like 12 p.m, then suddenly a chair from the kitchen table started to shake, like with violence. Of course, nobody was there. I ran out to the front yard and waited for my mom to come home. She was there by 1 p.m. 20 years later, I still don't know how the chair was moving like that, because a lot of things that happened to us when we were kids have a reasonable explanation. This, on the other hand, could be my mind playing with me but never happened again, and I was a normal kid with normal parents and friends, no traumas, or psychological problems. One time I was laying in bed reading, and my bed started shaking, and the headboard was smacking the wall for several seconds for no reason. I was perturbed but eventually was like, haha, I don't know, poltergeist? And then, a few minutes later, I got a text from my friend asking if I'd felt the earthquake. Nothing else in my room noticeably moved, and earthquakes aren't common in my area, so I didn't think of an earthquake. I just went to immediately accept poltergeist like it was the natural and logical explanation. A random man knocked on my parents' front door repeatedly and asked me by name to open it. This was before Ring doorbells were really a thing, so I actually had to go to the door to see who it was. I looked through the peephole and saw a man that I didn't know standing right in front of the door, looking right into the peephole. I remember he had some gray hair but was balding and was wearing a brown flannel. He kept asking for me and banging on the door. Being a scared kid, I ran away from the door and called my mom crying. By the time my parents got home, the guy was gone. It's been more than a few years since it happened, and my parents just recently told me that it was probably my great uncle, that I've never met, looking for someone to borrow money from. This happened about 2 years ago. I came home from work and walked into the kitchen. I noticed black dots in the dining room window and drapes. I walked over to check it out and saw 30 or so flies on the window and drapes. They weren't flying around or moving much at all. The window was open about an inch or so, but no tears in the screen or any other gap they could have gotten in through. The windows in the rest of the house were all closed too. No flies in the other rooms of the house, just on the window. I had taken the trash out that morning, so they didn't come from there. It reminded me of the Amityville horror. I blasted them all with bug spray, and that was that. Hasn't happened since. So, I wasn't home alone, but there was no one exactly in range, if you will. My dad was asleep across the house. My phone was sitting on the corner of my desk, about 6 to 8 feet away from me. I was trying to go to sleep when all of a sudden my phone started playing a video about the movie The Blair Witch Project. I was about 11 at the time, so after about 20 minutes of fighting the urge to shit myself, I got up and went over to check it. My phone wasn't turned on, and when I opened it, YouTube wasn't open. The video stopped playing when I unlocked my phone, and I still have no idea what the fuck happened. When I was about 6 to 8, I woke up startled from my sleep by what sounded like a pack of snarling wolves. I lived in rural New England, and it wasn't unheard of. I also was on the top story of the house, so I was obviously safe. However, they sounded so close, like they were on the deck below my window. After laying still and scared for a few minutes, I managed to get up, creep to my window, curtains were closed, and very slowly peek between them. The minute I did, the sound vanished, and I saw absolutely nothing outside. Mind you, my vision has adjusted by this point, so I would have seen any living thing. My room was pitch dark with no way an animal outside could have seen me and, if so, not been able to vanish so quickly. I still have no explanation other than possibly a strange instance of a sleep paralysis type event that involved oral hallucination. Never had this experience since. Context: I was maybe 12 or 13, my parents were visiting my sister at university, and my brother was in town visiting his girlfriend. We lived on a ranch about 25 minutes from town, with my only neighbors being my grandparents, who are very old. Our house is built on a concrete platform, on a hill. So, there are some wooden steps to get from the back porch to the ground, which is right outside my window. I was sitting in my room watching YouTube, chilling, when I heard a heavy creak on one of the steps. I paused my video and stared at my window, closed my blinds, knowing that all I had to do was open them up and see what it was, but I ignored it and kept watching YouTube. Maybe a minute passes, and I hear 3 more. Heavy steps. Sounds like the bottom of boots on wood. I spring out of bed and into the hallway while calling my mom. I frantically explain the situation, quietly, and she asks me a simple question: are the dogs even barking? No. I have 3 white labs, all in the main room, that have a clear sight of the back porch. I let out a sigh of relief and hung up the phone. The second I end the call with my mom, my dogs absolutely explode. Barking, baring teeth, hair standing up and all. I want to get a gun, but all of them require me to run across the main room, which is all windows, and I don't want to see what's out there or they see me. I run to my room and grab a pocket knife and call my brother, telling him to get home immediately. My dogs bark for maybe another few seconds, and they stop. Never found out what was behind the blinds. P.S. Sorry for the anticlimactic ending. I was way too scared to see what or who it was. I was hanging out in the guest bed of my home, facing the wall, and heard the door open. I thought it was my aunt, so I asked if she could turn the light off, but she didn't respond. I asked again, and still no response, so I just brushed it off. Then I felt something lay next to me in bed and thought it was her, so I turned around to ask her why she didn't respond, and there was no one laying next to me. I immediately got up and slept in my mom's room. I wasn't exactly home alone, and it wasn't my home, but in Mexico, I was visiting my family and staying in my grandma's house. It was just us 2. Now my grandma's home is divided into two separate two-story buildings where the second floor of the first building, where my grandma slept, was used as a wood workshop to make portraits, family business stuff, and the second floor of the second building, where I was staying at the time, was this one room that was locked and had a bunch of heavy equipment and was directly above the room I was staying in. It was essentially a storage room. Now, one night, I was staying in my room in building 2, my grandma was sleeping in building 1, and I heard some of the heavy equipment moving around upstairs directly in front of me, where the locked storage room is. Keep in mind, it was just my grandma and me. We were the only two, and she was sleeping. I should also point out that several of the workers who work in the wood shop during the day have reported seeing the apparition of an older man, who is believed to be my deceased grandfather. When I was 12, I was home alone around 7 p.m., and the sun had gone down. I was watching Grease, and it was during the car race scene. I started to notice a glow out the window, visible even behind the shades. I cracked open the shades to see a blazing fire across my neighbor's front lawn. Their dry leaf piles had caught fire, but it was no accident. My neighbors had just sold a house to the first black family who moved into our town, and a small plague of KKK members who still resided in a nearby trailer park community had come by my neighbors, the Sellers, new house and lit their lawn on fire. Police got involved. They never caught who did it, but believe they know the area from which they came. That was the first time I ever experienced racism. My school had black kids, and everyone got along fine. It wasn't until high school, when parents had bred enough hatred into their kids, that the students began to show any signs of racism. Ghost sighting. I was maybe 10. I lived close enough to my school to be able to walk home for lunch. Sitting on the couch, deciding whether it was worth going back, I look up at a mirror that's hanging on the wall behind the TV, and I see standing behind me a woman in a lacy, white dress looking me in the eye. I whip my head around hard enough to hear my neck pop, and there's nothing. And that room had nothing white in it. Brown carpet, yellowish walls, brown curtains, a glass table with some fake fruit in it, and she was standing right in front of the table. I stared into that room for the next 2 hours until my mom got home. I got a phone call, landline, but it had a different ringtone. So, I looked at the phone, and it said Page from headset 2, which was upstairs. I immediately muted the TV and answered the page. There was just silence on the other end, and I didn't say anything. I should have. More on that later. I hung up and just sat in silence and fear for 5 minutes listening for any movement upstairs. After hearing nothing, I decided I had to investigate. It's not like I could just go back to watching TV. Plus, I was in a basement, not many options. So, I make my way through the house, upgrading my weapons as I go like I'm in a zombie survival movie. I get to the room where headset 2 should be, and it's not there. This honestly didn't calm me down at all. I thought maybe they moved to a part of the house Elle didn't check. Then I got a great idea. I backtracked down to the basement like all good horror movie decisions, and I took the original headset and paged the second one so I could locate the intruder. Brilliant. But then my couch started ringing. I butt-paged myself. If I had at least said hello originally, I might have heard it under the cushion and avoided 10 minutes of panic. My parents were out and left us, kids, at home, 13 meters, 11F, 9 meters, and 6F, and some cabbie pulled into the driveway. We figured he was turning around because people did it all the time, but he got out and started trying all the doors, even went around back and tried the sliding glass door. We hid in one of the bedrooms and called our parents, and they called the cab company, and they said no one had been dispatched there, Fiki, but if they had, it was normal to try and get in the house. The cab company ended up shutting down a few years later, but that was pretty fucked up.